Bonsoir et bienvenue. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here for our SYA France live stream. We're so excited to be doing this tonight. I'm Avery Steele. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions here at SYA, but I'm also an SYA France alum. And here I have my colleague, Shauna, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shauna Campbell, and I'm the Admissions Marketing Manager here at SYA. So before we get started, I just want to point out the chat box feature, which you can find on the right-hand side of this broadcast. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to introduce yourself so we can see who's watching. And then later on, you could type in your questions into this box as well. And then towards the later half of this broadcast, we will use your questions and ask our alums. So feel free to start typing those now too.
Great, thank you, Shauna. So we also have, most importantly, the whole point of this really is two awesome alums joining us today. They're going to talk about their experience, they'll answer questions. So Claire, I guess you start first. If you want to introduce yourself, please.
Hi guys, I'm Claire. I'm a senior and I live in New Hampshire, and I finished SYA last year.
Thank you, Claire. And Daphne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Daphne. I am also a senior. I'm at the Thatcher School in Ojai, California, and I live in Las Vegas. And Claire and I were in the same SYA France class that graduated last May.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And we're so excited to get started. So to start off, Shauna and I will ask you a couple questions, but then hopefully we'll have some questions in our chat box from the viewers, and we'll sort of move on to those after. So the first question I wanted to ask both of you is, what made you want to study abroad in the first place? What drew you to apply to SYA?
Well, for me, it was a big decision. I have lived in Concord, New Hampshire for most of my life, and I wanted some sort of change. And my first 2 years of high school had been not boring per se, but something I felt was missing, which I know sounds super cliche. But I just heard about it from my French teacher because my school was a founding school of SYA, and so she just introduced it to us just on principle, and I started seriously considering it, and I realized it was kind of the perfect thing, and I decided to apply almost on a whim. And my mom had studied abroad in France in college, so she was pushing me too. But in the end, it was really just that sense of adventure and wanting to change up my routine a little bit, or a lot, because it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's definitely a big change of routine. But awesome. Thank you, Claire. Daphne, what made you want to study abroad with SYA?
So I moved around quite a bit when I was younger, but that was mostly because of my parents' work and what they were doing. And I came to boarding school for high school, which was kind of a big move, but it's only like 6 hours driving. And then, similar to Claire, my French teacher introduced it to us because she went on SYA years and years ago and absolutely loved it. So I thought I'd pitch the idea to my parents, not thinking much of it, and they were very supportive. And I loved studying French and culture and language in general, and I'd always wanted to go to France. I just never imagined it'd be so soon. So I just thought I'd apply and see what happens, and here I am. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a sort of a big leap at first. Well, lots of excitement, maybe a little nervousness, and sort of in that realm, what was your first few days or maybe your first few weeks like when you actually get there and you're seeing what you've been imagining for so many months, your arrival at Rennes? What was that sort of like?
Oh my gosh, I remember it really well. Mostly it was a blur, but I was super nervous, and before leaving in the airport, I had been sobbing because I didn't want to say goodbye to my family. But I remember first stepping out and being like, okay, like this doesn't look that different. What's going on? But then I met my host family, and I remember just trying to speak with them in French. I really was not very good at it. And I was nervous, but once I had started hanging out with them and talking to my host sister, I felt a lot better about it. And one thing for me that I did, basically sometimes every hour, but usually every day, is I would like sit back and kind of congratulate myself for getting through another hour, getting through another day of living in France. And that helped a lot with just my confidence level and being like, oh, I can do this. This is awesome. And then it also helped me enjoy my surroundings and appreciate what I was doing and how cool it was. But there was, of course, a lot of nervousness, a lot of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here for 9 months? But just the things that put me at ease were having my host family there, setting up my room, meeting all the other Americans, and seeing how cool of an experience it was going to be.
Awesome.
I don't think I realized how big of a deal it was or what I was really getting into until we got on this big bus to drive from the Paris airport to Rennes, and we stopped at some like station halfway there to get like food and snacks. So I was trying to order this sandwich or bread or something, and I just had no idea what I was doing. I was completely like lost, and that was the first time I kind of realized like I'm kind of alone in this until I meet, you know, my host family and my fellow like classmates and everything. And then we arrived at our like beautiful schoolhouse, and we were all staying in one room waiting for our host families to come pick us up. And that was nerve-wracking because we'd exchanged emails beforehand. And I was like, I'm living with these strangers for an entire year. Like, they're so gracious to accept me. And sharing that first meal with my host parents was one of the most magical things ever. And I still talk to them pretty regularly. And just finding people who are feeling similar to you was really powerful for me. And just understanding that we're all in this together. And I made the decision on my own. And just remembering like why I came and my goals or whatever. So that was really nice.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It sounds like both of you sort of already touched on this, but since you've sort of alluded to it a bit, I guess I want to know more details about your host family. Can you tell me a little bit about what your family was like, who was in it, what your relationship was like?
Well, I had I had two host sisters and one host brother technically, but the older two, the brother and sister, were also studying abroad, so they weren't ever home. So my host sister was 16, approximately my age, and she was fantastic. My host parents were amazing, and we worked out really well. Our first bonding moment was the fact that almost everybody in the family rode horses, and I was also a horseback rider, so I could talk about that a little bit. I knew the word for horse, so that was definitely a plus. My host dad was really cool because he liked telling me things, anything and everything, which helped my listening comprehension and just learning French culture. So he would tell me about the wines and the cheeses and anything and everything, really. But then if I really wanted to feel comfortable, I would talk to my host sister. She helped me through everything. I adored her. I still talk to her. Basically on a monthly, every other month, we get busy type of basis. And I'm so grateful to them because they embrace me wholeheartedly. My host mom would drive me to the horseback riding lessons every week. And we were able to bond. It took some time because I didn't understand a lot of French at first. But really, they were the best. I'm so grateful every single day, even now.
That's awesome. That's awesome to have something in common too, to sort of like share something a little bit before you get there. It definitely helps with small talk in the beginning before you get really familiar. That's awesome. And what about you, Daphne?
So my host parents were a little bit older, so they had 3 kids who were all grown and out of the house. My youngest host sister was 19 and going to college in a city across the country. So I didn't see her all that often, but it was really nice to bond with her when she was around. So for the most part, it was just my host parents and I at home. And they were just some of the best, like most down-to-earth, wonderful people I've ever met. And for them to just open their home and heart to me from the first night was just an incredible feeling. And to bond with them, we still talk pretty regularly. And they were just there for any questions I had, either school-wise, personally, and bonding with them just made my entire SYA experience memorable and so positive.
That's great to hear. Thanks so much for sharing that, both of you. Now, moving more onto an academic subject, what is your typical school day like? I know they probably vary a lot week to week, but that's a question that we get a lot, so I thought I'd throw it towards you guys. What was your typical school day? And you can feel free to mention like a favorite class you loved or a teacher or anything like that.
Okay. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened, but I remember, well, school started at 9, I think. I think that was correct. And so I lived about half an hour from the school and from Rennes. And so I would take the bus every morning and then I would get there and I think we had like 5 or 6 classes a day and we would just kind of go through them. Every day was a different schedule, and Wednesdays were different because in France, you have a half day on Wednesday. That's just something cool that they do, and I really enjoyed. But you would just, you would go from class to class, and all the classes were in the building, and I'm sure, as everyone knows, they're all conducted in French except for English and math. So in terms of classes, I loved all of them. One of my favorites was art history because our teacher, JP, he was the funniest guy I have ever met. He was really understanding with our levels of French, but he also was encouraging with us talking and putting ourselves out there. By the end of the year, I did a 45-minute presentation on an artist, which was really intimidating at first, but really cool once you had finished it. And just, his humor was fantastic. My English teacher, I really loved her. She was the one who you could kind of debrief with because there's always a lot happening at SYA. There's just lots of feelings and emotions, ups and downs all the time. And so to have the English class to debrief and connect our materials to our lives, it was fantastic, really fantastic. And then there's usually a free block that you have that you can just study or hang out with friends, whatever. And then for lunch, I think we had about an hour or so, and we would go to the local French high schools and we could eat lunch there, or we could buy sandwiches at the boulangerie down the street, which I personally loved doing, especially when it was warm. And then school usually ended between 4 and 5. And so then you could take a bus back home, or, people had their different schedules from day to day. And like I said, it varied, but I think that's pretty typical.
Yeah, would you agree, Daphne? Was that sort of your experience as well? I know the school day must have been about the same since you guys were, of course, in the same class, but did you have maybe some extracurriculars after school some days, or like anything else you want to mention? Or maybe you can talk about your favorite teacher or your favorite class as well.
Of course. So similar to Claire, I also had a commute, which isn't for every SYA student, but depending on where your host family lives. I also took a bus to get to school, which wasn't a problem for me. I liked navigating the public transportation Rennes. That was a cool experience. So the school day ended between 4 and 5, but if you had, let's say, a club meeting, you would stay a little bit longer. So I was doing politics club and the literary magazine, which both met once every 2 weeks or so. So that politics club ties into my favorite class, which was Global Politics and Studies with Pascal, who's an incredible teacher and someone I look up to still and I'm still in contact with. He really pushed us to analyze things in a different way, and we learned a lot about French political systems and things going on there to connect it to places around the world and our experiences so far. So that was a really interesting class for me to take. Otherwise, literary magazine and politics club were open to all students, and those were within the school. But I signed up for a Zumba class at the local university, and that was a fun experience to just do dance class once a week with local university students, and there were some older people taking the class as well, so just seeing a different dynamic was really fun.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, there's definitely lots of opportunities to get involved in clubs or extracurriculars, as we heard already. So that's great. Thank you. let's see. Do we have any questions yet from viewers on
Not yet,
stream?
but if you guys want to start typing in questions, feel free, and we'll start asking them. Can you guys maybe talk a little bit about what Ren is like and what living there is like?
Okay, so I come from Concord, New Hampshire, which is, it's supposed to be a city, but it's not really a city. It's pretty small, most people around. And I live on a high school campus, which is basically an own little community in itself. And so for me, going to Rennes was a pretty big deal because it was way more of a city than I had ever lived in before. But it was beautiful. And I loved, one of my favorite parts actually was learning how to navigate it and figure out the bus systems and going downtown there was just a bunch of little shops everywhere, going to the boutiques. You could find a new one every week. And there was restaurants all around, and you could figure out how, eventually I figured out, it took me a little bit, how everything kind of pieces together. There's parks that are just gorgeous. And the Star bus system, it takes some time, but once you understand where everything's going and coming from, you can use that pretty regularly. And they give you the card so you can easily swipe in and out for anything. And yeah, as a city, I always felt safe. It was beautiful. During Christmas, there was the Marché Noël, and that was really cool too. That stayed up for, I think, the whole month of December. I'm trying to think of any more specifics. Daphne, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was just going to add that it's a pretty medium-sized city, but there are a lot of colleges and like educational kind of institutions, which made the city feel young and vibrant and alive. And as big as it was, there's a lot of commuter kind of neighborhoods, I guess, suburban areas around Rennes. You saw kind of familiar faces on the bus or walking around. So that felt like a community in and of itself. And just being able to go to events or concerts and things like that in the city and really engaging with France and Rennes outside of school was really fun. And if you had host siblings that were younger, you like made friends through extracurriculars, like the entire city becomes really accessible. And it was my first time kind of living alone in a city, which is unique, I think, for most 16, 17-year-olds to be able to say. So that was just a beautiful place to, I think, study abroad because it's not intimidating, but it's also not a small community that you get bored of. There's always something new to explore and learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny too, Daphne, that you mentioned sort of meeting a community on like your commute to school, because I do remember making a friend in France on the bus. I was reading an assignment for class, and she started talking to me about the assignment, and it turned out she went to the high school around the corner, and she became my new friend that way. So lots of good memories that you're bringing up. But thank you so much for sharing. And it looks like we do have some new questions from our viewers now. Should we move to one of our questions, Shauna?
Yeah, since we have been talking a little bit about school, can you guys maybe answer this? One of our students who's been accepted is curious about what the daily homework load is like, and how long will it take, or is it very intense?
It depends on a lot of things. First, your French level. Second, what point you are at during the year. Because for me, I came from French 2. And so an assignment that would have taken me 15 minutes in English probably took me at least double that amount of time. But also the teachers are very aware of that, and it's manageable. I can't really remember an exact time that it took. Like a couple hours. I mean, it's high school, so you still have to expect some sort of commitment for the schoolwork, and everyone's invested in your learning, especially learning French. And so yeah, a couple hours, I would say. Nothing too difficult, but things that would push you intellectually and help you learn the language, writing assignments. And also, as the year went on and I got much better at French, I noticed that the assignments themselves were just quicker for me to get done. And I was determined too. So I put my time in, but I think that also helped me a lot. So if you look at it as something that is going to help you progress, it doesn't feel that bad as far as I can remember. So overall, just it will take some time. It will be frustrating as in any school at some points, but manageable.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree that it becomes more manageable as the year goes on and you learn more. But the way I kind of think about it now is you get as much out as you're willing to put into it. So it's easy to maybe blow through like all your homework the first few weeks and not really spend time engaging with the language and things you don't understand and don't know. But as soon as you find like a support system with other students in your classes or your teachers, and you're willing to work hard for the benefit of learning the new language and learning it well, I think it becomes much more manageable. And it's not anything more than I would have expected from junior year and like at my home school, for example.
Great answers. Thank you. Looks like we're getting a few more questions. Some of them a little bit logistical that I'm happy to answer. One of which is, when do you get assigned to your host family? So you should get emailed your host family information in early June. And that includes ways to get in touch with them and be able to introduce yourself, get to know them a little bit via email before you arrive. Daphne, I remember you had mentioned that you exchanged emails with your host family before you arrived, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they'd emailed me kind of an introduction. I was so nervous because it was all in French. So trying to read and decipher it. And I was like, oh, how long should I respond? And they sent photos of everyone in the family. So that was really cute of them. And it was just like, hi, we're so happy to have been matched with you as our host student. Like, what do you like? And all these things. And kind of saying, like, you're living 20 minutes away from school. And like, when you come, we can show you all these things. So it was very warm and just got me super excited to meet them in person. And it made me feel like I'd already kind of like made a contact. So it didn't feel as intimidating meeting them on the first day in Rennes.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and should we answer another question, Sean?
Yeah, so I guess the other logistical question we see here is how you deal with money. So for covering any costs, this parent is asking, did you open a local bank account or did you just use an ATM? How did you guys deal with money?
So what I did with my parents is I got, at first, a credit card that was connected to their account that I was only to use for restaurants and one other thing, but I didn't use it that often. And then there was a debit card that was connected to my account, and every month, because it's like I was charged $6 or something at the ATM every time that I withdrew money. But when I was running low, I would just go to the ATM that was down the street and I would withdraw I think probably like 100 to 200 euros at a time, which I think was a lot for everyone else, but I just kept it and I saved it, and I wouldn't carry that all around with me at one time, but eventually it would break down, and yeah, I would just use it and you have to keep kind of good track because there's a lot of shopping and eating and you want to buy a lot of stuff. So yeah, mine was connected to my personal account, but I think other people had it differently or got some sort of monthly allowance or something. But the ATM works really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so similar to Claire, I just had my own debit card from the US and I didn't open any kind of local bank account there. And there was an ATM really close to this school, so you can just go down the street. It does charge for foreign cards, but it's not too much if you take out like a good amount of money and just keep it and kind of budget it throughout the month or a couple of months. And it's just, you figure out like where you're spending your money and how often to make a system or a plan to not spend too much every month, because it is easy to just buy a lot or buy dinner and lunch every day, but you're eating with your host family for most meals and lunches at the local French school. So it's really easy to cut down on spending if you want to budget and spend wisely abroad.
Great, thanks so much. We do have another question. They are asking, how close do you become with your class, or how much time you spend with them? I guess obviously you spend time with them in class, but how often did you guys spend, or did you spend time with your friends on the weekends, or just talk about your friends you met, I guess, while you were at SYA France.
I loved my friends. I think, well, what happened for our class is that people formed groups of friends that they were really close with, but because we were such a small class, especially by the end of the year, we all bonded a lot because we would also go on school trips. I think we had like 3 or 4 throughout the year. There was one like throughout the area of Bretagne, and then there was one to Paris, one to the east or south of France. And so you can figure out how to interact with everyone. And I feel like we got pretty close. But in terms of like hanging out with people, my friends and I would usually go out at least once a week on a Saturday or even Friday night. Or hang out on it's hard on Sundays because most things are closed, but and that was also tended to be a day for my host family. But I really, really relied on them for that support system and for being able to talk about how everything was going and just kind of hang out, have that group of Americans who understood exactly what you were going through, which made us a really unique group because we were the only people who really understood how challenging and amazing and difficult and just so many feelings all the time going on. And so I love my friends and I talk to them all the time. Unfortunately, we all live in very different parts of the country back in the US, but luckily we can connect in other ways. And we still have this year that really brought us all together. So I'm so thankful to my friends from SYA.
Yeah, the connections I made abroad and the friends I made in Rennes are some of the deepest, most like honest, I guess, incredible friendships I have to this day, because the experience of being so far from home, but finding home with a host family and your new classmates and all these things is so unique and something you're not going to find elsewhere. So just sharing that experience with the whole class was something, but the closer friendships I made, I also still talk to them all the time. And logistically, we'd meet up after school if we were all free, just go grab coffee at a cafe, or Saturday, meet up for lunch or dinner or something. And it was nice to have that close group of people. You didn't have to feel pressured around to speak really good French, or, just a support system. People who were encouraging and loving, and just so wonderful. So the people definitely made the year what it was for me, and I'm really grateful for that.
Did either of you make any French friends with local teens in the area?
That was a little harder, I would say. Most of us were timid, but like I said, I had a host sister who was about my age, and so I definitely relied on her. And so she would introduce me to her friends, and we would hang out for different events. Like I went with my host sister and her friend to Saint-Malo for the new year. And so I just spent a night with them, and that was really cool that they included me, and I had a great time. And I also, like I said, took horseback riding classes, and the girls in that class were really sweet to me and supportive. And I can't say I was as close with them as I was with my American friends, but even just interacting with them was a positive experience. And my host sister was my closest French friend, I would say.
Yeah, so my youngest host sibling was 19, so she wasn't there all that often. But when she was there and introduced me to her like college friends, that was really cool, to feel like, she wants me to like meet her friends, and that was exciting. Otherwise, just meeting people on the bus, as you said, or in Zumba class, just in passing, interacting, and bonding with French teens was a really special kind of thing that I loved about the year. And then SYA and the local French high school set up some meet and greet kind of thing. So there'd be themes, and you could go and have a discussion with local teens over lunch, or meet up and at the local high school when everyone's eating or something. So there were also efforts from the school to get you to meet people who also went to school really close to us, and that was really fun.
So we're getting a lot of questions about travel. So maybe you guys can talk a little bit about the places you went as a class for educational travel, and maybe what you guys did on the weekends, and talk a little bit about independent travel as well and how you guys did that.
Yeah, definitely. So travel was one of the best parts of my entire experience. My friends and I took a trip for most of the breaks that we could, or just like a weekend sometimes. And I went on every single one of those. And those are some of my best memories ever. And so in terms of the school trips, I mentioned them before. I think the first one we took was to Bretagne, which is like the region where Rennes is. And we did some exploring there. And that is a lot of with the school, and you take like little group field trips, different places. And then we went to Paris as a school, and that was beautiful too. There's just so many cool things happening in Paris. And then later in the year, we took half of the school went to the east of France, which was my group, and then the other half went to the south of France. And that was really cool too, because you could see how France is different across the country, and how it, like the east of France was very much influenced by Germany, and you could see that in the architecture and how those things changed. So a lot of the school trips were very informational, and doing cool sightseeing and having a tour guide, and very much guided in themselves, which was amazing. I loved those. But then in terms of independent travel, I took 1 weekend trip to Paris with my friends, and that was the first time I'd ever been to Paris. Actually, that was in November or something. And it was so much fun just to be able to walk around the city with my friends. And that was one of the moments when it hit me about how cool this experience was, to feel like I was independent and to have figured out the whole travel plans by ourselves, and just do whatever we wanted. And so that was my first taste of it. And then I took a trip with 3 of my friends to England and Scotland during the spring break. Yeah, exactly a year ago, actually. And so I'm getting all those memories back right now. But though that was, I think, the best trip of my entire life, because just the bonding experiences that we had, and figuring it out, and even on the trains, and shopping together, and having our own hotel rooms. It was really, really cool to see the different parts of the world, and see how everything was connected in Europe, and how easy traveling was, because that's not quite like the United States. So I just adored that part. And then I took a trip to Nice at the end of the year, which also I loved. Everything I did where I traveled was amazing. I did a Model UN trip to Geneva, Switzerland, which was fantastic. I feel like I did more traveling too, but those were the biggest parts, and those are some of my greatest memories that I've ever made. So I'm so thankful to SYA for that, especially because I think the traveling too helped me gain a sense of independence and confidence about moving around, and being sure of myself for other places that I am unfamiliar with. And that sense of travel has really stuck with me, and I miss it a lot now that I'm back in the United States and back in school. So yeah, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, we had one other class-wide trip to the Loire Valley in October, November time. And something that stood out about that trip and every other trip we took as a class was everything you learned in class leading up to the trips was meant so you could really enjoy the experience when you were there in person, and seeing all the chateaus, and in Paris, like seeing artwork by artists you'd studied in art history, or we visited the US Embassy, which was really interesting, and all these things. So you were reading about it and learning about it in class, and that was just translated in person. And then I also did Model UN, and I did another one in Grenoble, and that was really cool. And after that, I went up to visit my host sister, which was fun, in the east of France. So all these opportunities really are more accessible when you're abroad, and in a country like France, which is so connected just by the train system and things like that. Movement is really encouraged for your learning and personal growth.
Great. So now that you guys have been, back for basically a year, how has SYA influenced what you want to do in the future? Or has it helped you determine, an interest that you have, maybe something you want to study in college?
For me, I would say that I'm definitely still interested in pursuing French. I don't know. I'm one of those kids who really is unsure about what I want to do going forward. My experience with Model UN really opened up my eyes to the whole foreign relations or international relations. So I am interested in that. I've given it a lot of thought, but I can't say I know exactly what I'm going to do. But it's definitely influenced my love for traveling and love for culture and communicating with other people. So I don't know exactly where that could lead me, but I'll never forget how I felt when I was abroad, and I think I'll stick with that as that continues on.
Something that SYA really gave me was a sense of freedom in myself and my interests, and the fact that not knowing exactly what I want to do now was more liberating than I thought it was before I left. So before leaving, I thought I only wanted to go into foreign policy and like work for the UN or do something very direct and straightforward. But leaving also exposed me to like linguistics. So I'm doing my senior exhibition project actually on immigration language. And that was something I wouldn't have expected to be as interested in before SYA. So I think going into college, similar to Claire, just the themes of global like relations, politics, and language are all really big for me right now. And SYA is to thank for all of that and just solidifying what I am interested and passionate about, and being away and having the chance to take classes that I was interested in gave me the opportunity to really explore my passions individually. And that was so great for me.
So thank you so much for answering that. I think we have time for a couple more questions before we sign off. So I guess since we're on the topic of college, I'm guessing both of you have started to apply to college. Has SYA helped you as far as, do you think it's distinguished you in the college application process, or are you guys going to be writing about SYA in your college applications?
Yeah, SYA was a huge part of my college application, mostly because I had just gotten back as I was writing it, and it was just so everything that they asked me, I wanted to talk about SYA because it was a really, really big influencer on even who I am as a person in terms of my confidence level and how I feel interacting with other people and how I look at the world. And so I wanted to put that out there. And not just like, oh, I did a year in France, like, oh, what that year taught me. And so I think I wrote my main essay on SYA and a lot of other little pieces I mentioned in a lot just because it was so prevalent. And then in terms of choosing the college, I was really looking for like a city, and I realized that I wanted something that was culturally exciting and a lot of different mindsets. And so I ended up applying early action to Georgetown, and I got in there, which I think SYA probably had a big influence on because it helped me hone in on that was the place for me. And I just think that the whole SY experience with what it means and what it's intending for you to learn as a person as you grow and develop. And even we're young, we don't really know exactly how our futures are going to play out. But I thought a lot about my year in France in terms of applying and even choosing the college.
Something I really appreciated about being gone or being in run for junior year was we kind of escaped the whole frenzy around college admissions at our home schools. And I was more focused on living the best year of my life and not as much SAT scores or GPAs or college lists. And I came back and I didn't feel at all left behind in that. I have supportive college counselors and resources online, things to help you kind of find your way even after you're back from a year abroad. And you can take all the testing in Ren and everything like that, so you don't fall behind logistically, but emotionally and personally. SYA defined so much of who I am now and who I want to become in the future. So I decided to apply early decision to Barnard College, which is where I'm going next year. For similar reasons, it's in a big city, and I wanted the same livelihood and vibrant, colorful community I found in Ren. So New York was a place for that, and I'm so grateful for having had an experience that clarified so much of what I wanted to do, and that came up a lot, both in my interviews and on my college written applications for things like personal strengths and weaknesses and what I liked and things like that. So in all of the ways, that's why it was really a big part of my college process.
Well, congratulations to both of you. That's awesome. And before we get to our last question, I just want to point out to our audience that on Friday, we're going to be having an Instagram takeover from a student who is currently in France. So that is also another opportunity for you to ask questions to that student and kind of get a better idea of what a day in the life is like living in Rennes. So I guess the last question I have for you guys before we sign off is, do either of you have a piece of advice for students who are going to be going to SYA France next year?
Yeah, I mean, congratulations, first of all, because it's such an exciting opportunity. My advice would just be to keep an open mind and to be aware that there are going to be incredible ups, but there are also going to be downs that you have to work through, because you don't always feel like you should be unhappy ever because you're living abroad, but there's just so many emotions, like I've said over and over, that go into it. And so just keep an open mind and find a support system. And every day, what I said at the beginning and that had really, really helped me was just kind of thank yourself for being there, for giving yourself this opportunity. Travel as much as you can, make friends. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and to speak French, whatever your level is, because you will inevitably get better just by being in the classes and having a host family. And just embrace it, make it yours. It's an incredible opportunity. And being a teenager and a high schooler living abroad, it's so unique that I'm going to hold on to that for the rest of my life. And even as I go abroad, as I get older, it's just that experience of being 17 and living in France will forever it changed my life. It really changed my life. It changed my confidence level. It changed how I look at myself. And I just hope that you embrace it. Yeah.
I would say allow yourself to feel everything that being abroad has to offer, and don't be too shy or scared of making a mistake or seeming foolish or dumb in any way, because this is the 1 year you have to just make yourself happy and do things for yourself, as selfish as that may sound. A student who graduated from my high school who went to SYA told me that piece of advice was just to do things for yourself for this 1 year. And leaving, I can say that's something that really changed the course of my year at SYA and just my life in general, is allowing yourself to pursue your own interests and explore life in a new way, in a new country, probably away from anything you've ever known to be familiar. And it's just such a beautiful and unique time in your life. So just hold on to it and embrace it and make the most of it while you can, because starting on day one feels like the year is endless, but the day you're leaving on that plane is like, yes, I did that. And you just feel so good about everything you've accomplished. So congratulations. And I really hope you have the opportunity to have as great of a year as we both did in the Ren.
Well, on that note, thank you both so much for joining us. And if we didn't get to your question, don't worry. Avery here can respond to individual questions. And parents, please don't hesitate to contact Avery with all those logistical questions you may have. Daphne, Claire, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Just wave to everybody and say au revoir.
Bonne soirée.
Bonne soirée. Merci beaucoup.